As I've immersed myself in the writing and reading communities, I've noticed a pattern. More than ever, there's the opportunity to write and read what you want to. There is a community for all walks of life, and a book for every person. Even 20 years ago, it could be challenging to find a book which featured a competent female hero or a gay protagonist. But that's changing as publishers and readers become more accepting of a wider variety of stories. That said, it hasn't escaped my notice that a bias remains, specifically when it comes to masculine versus feminine books, or books which are clearly meant for women or feminine-leaning individuals. More traditional books, marketed first to men, might include the likes of Lord of the Rings, the Mistborn trilogy, or the Wheel of Time saga. More feminine books are those you'll see exploding on BookTok, with Twilight, Shatter Me, The Cruel Prince, A Court of Thorns and Roses, and Fourth Wing being examples of books which primarily cater to a feminine audience. It feels like I shouldn't complain, because all of the authors behind these books have done well, and all have been able to find a readership in a landscape that was predominantly designed for male readers not 50 years ago. All the same, there's a tendency to see female books as less serious or less literary, when that couldn't be further from the truth. Granted, men and women have different tastes, and if a man doesn't get Twilight, I don't blame him. There are a lot of masculine properties I can't relate to, like the many Transformers films that to me seem to be about why explosions are fun to look at and listen to. Moreover, I'm not trying to equate Twilight with the works of Brandon Sanderson. Even as a Twilight fan, I can recognize its flaws and acknowledge that from a writing perspective, Mistborn is better written. I'm not going to say Twilight deserves a place on the top 10 best fantasy books of all time. I genuinely enjoy Brandon Sanderson's works. In fact, while I often prefer female writers gravitating towards the themes such authors tend to cover, I've enjoyed my share of male authors. Brandon Sanderson, C.S. Lewis, and Tolkien will always be among some of my favorite writers, and I don't disparage anyone who loves them. However, this brings me to an important point. Books written for a male audience are seen as universal, while books written for a female audience are seen as niche, even if they include universal elements. Having read extensively in the fantasy genre, diving into everything from epic fantasy to YA romantasy, I can say that one series that is undervalued is the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. Yes, it has plenty of romance, and some scenes veer on the steamy side. There are chapters devoted to characters just hanging out, going on dinner dates, or swapping books. But I'd like to know why the inclusion of such elements suddenly demotes a book. Why is something suddenly laughable because women are drawn to it? Why is a story worthy of ridicule because it chooses to focus more on characters than intricate politics or grueling battles? I mean, don't get me wrong, politics and battles are exciting, and I'm a fan of A Song of Ice and Fire as well. I love that shit. What I want to know is why those things, battles, politicians, rich world building, and so on, are seen as inherently more valuable than female elements like romance, motherhood, character-driven storytelling, or STEAM. Why are ideas which appeal to men seen as universal, while those which appeal to women are niche? From what I understand, men and women are 50-50 as far as the population distribution goes. Yet, as soon as something becomes too girly, it loses appeal for a broader audience, while books focusing on war and political intrigue are seen as being for everyone. I bring this up because I've noticed a trend, especially when it comes to male readers in the fantasy genre. I've seen dozens of women talk about Tolkien and Brandon Sanderson, but it's rare for men to talk about our books. Now, I'm not saying ladies don't have a bias, because we do. There are women who accuse male authors of being stodgy, or who seem to hate them just because they're straight, white, and male. If a man doesn't include a gay character in his book, he's accused of homophobia, even if his story is about a robot wandering through a wasteland. The female bookworm community isn't perfect, and we have our own problems, which I'll address later. Still, it's not typical to see women making fun of the books men adore. In fact, we often adore them too. Plenty of women have embraced Game of Thrones, the Stormlight Archives, and Lord of the Rings. You don't see female booktubers making fun of Brandon Sanderson. I mean, there's probably a couple, but it's not common. When it comes to male YouTubers though, there's this definite idea, and I think it's a subconscious one, where female books, or books which prominently feature romance, aren't considered serious fantasy. Some will make fun of these books, which can be hurtful in itself, but more often they won't even acknowledge their existence. The female readership will sing the praises of Brandon Sanderson. But if the male readership decides to read Stephenie Meyer or Sarah J. Maas, they have to do so ironically. Romance in general gets a bad rep, but if 50% of the population values it, I'd like to know how that's considered a niche. Why is it normal for men to laugh at what we enjoy while we treat their books with adoration and respect? Throne of Glass has elements that will appeal to female readers, including teens. But it also, in my opinion, features all of those universal elements. There's rich world building, engaging characters, plot twists, original concepts, and high stakes. There are compelling villains, exciting battles, and brutal losses. In short, Throne of Glass, as far as I'm concerned, delivers on the same promises as a Sanderson novel. If you're looking for an epic fantasy, it has it all. It's not sugarcoated either. Maas's Aelin goes through just as much shit as Sanderson's Vin. But as far as male booktubers are concerned, Throne of Glass doesn't exist, because it also emphasizes romance, and that automatically makes a book mediocre. That's insulting in itself, that romance is viewed as an inferior genre. That the topics that are important to literally half the population are somehow of less value. But it's subtle. When you keep within your lane, it's easy to see the positive and believe we're doing just fine. And in many ways we are. I can read and love the works of Sarah J. Maas without giving a rat's ass if some dude gave her the time of day or not. With her readership being what it is, she doesn't need that male readership. Plus, I know romance isn't for everyone. That's fine. There are women who hate romance, and men who love it. There are book boyfriends who read ACOTAR because their girlfriends encourage them to, and they end up loving it as much as we do. My own father has watched the Twilight films with my mother and I, and acknowledged that they included a lot of cool elements. Moreover, there are female writers who break through. Harry Potter is the most universally accepted series of our time, though it's worth noting that Rowling had to adopt a gender-neutral pen name so boys wouldn't be turned off by its being a girl's book. Plenty of men in the film and book spheres also sing the praises of The Hunger Games, despite that being a female-led book with one of the most famous love triangles of our time. Men adore the fantasy epics of Robin Hobb and Ursula K. Le Guin. I'm not saying that there aren't female writers excelling, even among male readers. In any given list, a man might list Ursula K. Le Guin and Robin Hobb as the only female authors among 20, but I can't completely fault them. After all, I have an unconscious bias too. I, along with several women, will often read primarily female writers. Though I might list 6 male authors I like, there will be 26 female writers I adore, so I'd be a hypocrite to attack those men. You can love what you love without worrying about who wrote it. All that said, I still want to address this idea that the majority of our books are some kind of joke, Again, I'm not saying Twilight competes with Tolkien. Even ACOTAR has its flaws, though I believe, generally speaking, that masses books are good, even if they won't be for everyone. They're not perfect, and we can laugh at Feyre's leaky bowel problems or the fact that Mass uses the words Illyrian babies and males way too many times. Nobody will be able to forget the instance in which readers got to encounter velvet-lined steel, either. It's okay to laugh about this shit. Yet you don't see women making fun of men's literature in this way. We like to criticize men, sure, but you won't see a woman making a point of how all of Brandon Sanderson's characters say, hum. I mean, every writer does it. We all have these funny phrases that get stuck in our heads, but somehow male books are above this kind of appraisal. As I noted earlier, women are also sucked into this idea that our books are silly and unworthy of serious discussion or analysis. In all my searching, I've been able to find only one YouTuber who has actually analyzed Twilight without bias from a psychological perspective. She agreed with nearly everything I have thought about the series, and she did so in a respectful and academic manner. Despite Twilight's flaws, which she acknowledged, she was still able to discuss and analyze it in a way our books so rarely are. Still, she was the exception rather than the rule, because another trend I've seen among female readers is the tendency to tear other women down. We won't tear Brandon Sanderson to pieces, but if it's a book written by a woman, especially one that's geared towards teens or younger readers, then it's fair game. Women can be misogynistic because we've bought into this narrative that our books are less worthy of serious consideration or merit. Funnily enough, we as fans will even consume and support those videos which make fun of our fandoms, because that is the only media available to us. 90% of the content around Twilight is there to make fun of it or point out its problems. And I'll devour that content as a fan because I have to take what I can get. Again, I don't have a problem with constructive criticism. Twilight has flaws, and I'll say that as a die-hard fan. But my channel has become something of a safe space for those looking to discuss the books, because I've recognized what they've done right as well. Meyer isn't Sanderson, but Twilight has genuine positives, and I think it's worth taking the time to acknowledge that. More than anything, I'm tired of our best-selling books being a joke, especially when women's stories are always the butt of that joke. I'm tired of books being less respectable just because they value motherhood or include some intense kissing. I'm tired of male readers reading ACOTAR ironically just because women liked it so much. By all means, if you don't like something, say so. You can even joke about it. Just think about your own bias before you do, because if you're going into ACOTAR or any book looking for a joke, I think that's a bad attitude. I believe you should read a book and take it for what it is without bias before you form a judgment. A book isn't less valuable or worthy of serious analysis because it has spice in it or a love triangle. Throne of Glass is a great epic fantasy, which just happens to have more female-centric elements included. And Twilight, imperfect as it is, makes its own points for women and teens, which are worth being explored and discussed. I made this video because of a thumbnail I saw. I'm not going to say who the creator was. I'm not even mad at him. I haven't seen the video, so I can't judge. I'm certain he meant it to be a lighthearted video. Still, what struck me was his attitude towards the story in question, when compared with those penned by male authors. This booktuber regularly extols the virtues of Brandon Sanderson, and I don't fault him for that. I'm a Cosmere convert. He has countless reviews on Sanderson's novels, and he regularly discusses the likes of Wheel of Time or Discworld. But when it came time to review Fourth Wing, a book I haven't heard a complaint against yet, he had to make it a drinking game. Again, I haven't seen the video. He did one earlier on A Court of Thorns and Roses, which he also had to drink through. This was a video I actually looked forward to watching, and again, I haven't seen it. In all likelihood, there's probably nothing wrong with the videos in and of themselves. And if you somehow guess who I'm talking about and want to accuse me of hating on the poor guy, that couldn't be further from the truth. I have no problem with the creator in question. It just made me think of an important topic, and I felt the need to address it. All of the male authors were given serious reviews, while those books favored by women had to be reviewed in a comedic light, with alcohol to make them more palatable. It's possible I'm reading too much into this, and in some ways I feel like I'm overreacting, but it's food for thought. It's become normalized to treat women-led stories with some level of disdain, even at a benign level. If you read ACOTAR or Fourth Wing is a Man, you still have to do so like it's a joke, and I just think that's worth discussing. This has been a little different from my usual videos, but I appreciate anyone who has watched this far. Generally speaking, I try to stay away from anything political or heated, but I felt the need to address this, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on the matter. Again, this video was not intended to attack any other creators, and everything I say, as with anything, should be taken with a grain of salt. If you enjoyed this and want more content like it, hit that subscribe button. And if you'd like to hear some of my other hot takes, click the video on the left, where I list all the reasons I liked Twilight's Bella Swan. And if you're someone who's tired of hearing Twilight get crapped on and just want to hear some fun analysis on the series, click the video on the right, where I offer my own take on what the werewolves in the series symbolize. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching and happy reading.